When the wheel landed on Divinity Original Sin, I was pretty excited. I love Baldur's Gate 3. It's one of my favorite games of the past few years, so I was excited to see how Larian set the foundation which they would later build upon to make BG3. Now, I didn't start this game expecting the same polish and pedigree of BG3, but I do think I did myself a disservice playing Baldur's Gate before Divinity. The foundation I was hoping to see was there, but a lot of the features that made BG3 so immersive were missing from Original Sin, like being able to hover your cursor over a puddle to identify what it's made out of, or being able to throw enemies off cliffs for an instant kill. There's so many areas in this game with cliffs, and you literally have an ability to teleport enemies anywhere in a combat area, but you can't teleport them off a cliff. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about all the ways that Original Sin is not like Baldur's Gate, because that would just make for a shitty review. To be honest, I do think Original Sin does enough to make it stand out among the fantasy CRPG crowd, but there's a lot here I really didn't like. And that's unfortunate because I love these types of games, but I just wish I liked Original Sin more. I don't know if the mechanics didn't age well, that certainly could be the case. Bugs and gameplay quirks hindered progress, and overall the game created an experience that I wanted to like more. Let's dive into the game and what I think about it. Divinity Original Sin begins with you creating not one, but two main characters. These two are companions and have a whole history together that occurred prior to the events of the game, which you'll learn more about as the game unfolds. Your characters will bounce ideas off each other, give their opinions about what's currently happening in the game, and even argue with each other over decisions you make in the game, which triggers a rock, paper, scissors minigame to decide whose approach they should take for a situation. I love this idea and concept. You can make a decision, but then your companion disagrees. You lose the rock, paper, scissors battle, so you have to go with their decision, potentially altering the narrative. Where it got annoying though was when it came to solving puzzles or riddles. You could pick the right answer, but then your companion disagrees, they win the disagreement, and you have to go with the wrong answer. For example, there was a section I had to answer these riddles given to me by talking mushrooms, so that I could gain access to this area. I'm pretty sure I picked the right answer out of the three choices, but my companion wanted to disagree. They won that disagreement, and their answer was the wrong one, which then led to an unnecessary fight with the mushrooms. And also later in the game, it felt like the game would just pick the opposite of whatever my answer was in these rock, paper, scissors battles, because that started happening a lot. Anyways, so with your characters created, the story begins like how many other fantasy RPGs begin, with you washed up on a beach. Seriously though, why does it feel like every fantasy RPG begins this way? Your two characters are what's known as Source Hunters, a sort of police force that aim to expel any users of a dark magic called the Source. You're investigating a murder in which Source is believed to be involved, but this leads you down a conspiracy in which an evil entity is trying to be resurrected, which could threaten the fabric of space and time. The story goes to some interesting and at times convoluted places with all manner of interesting NPCs to talk to, like a wizard who prefers to be a cat and even the Weaver of Time herself. There was an instance of subversion that I thought was cool. The game builds up this one character to be the main villain of the story, only to reveal he's just a cog in this conspiracy plot, as you defeat him at the end of the first chapter. Once Original Sin introduces you to its mechanics, it drops you in its open world. Although calling Divinity's 3 chapters open worlds feels inaccurate, because while they are open and free to explore, they feel much more linear due to how leveling works in this game. Even if enemies are just one level above you, they will easily wipe your squad or pose a challenging fight. This makes it feel like the game wants you to progress through the story in a certain way and makes every quest important in order to gain the XP to level up. Like if you try to leave the opening city of Seal too early, the guards at the gate will literally tell you you're not strong enough to leave. Open the gate, please. If you'd be so kind.
You don't look like you're quite ready to head out into the wilds to me. You may have the right number of champions in your...
This is such a weird way to structure a game as it discourages exploration and led to me trying to figure out where the game wants me to go. Because of this, the opening section gets off to a slow and meandering start where it felt like I was doing a lot but accomplishing very little. I would stream this game for about 3 hours at a time and it felt like I wasn't getting a lot done in those 3 hours. I would say around the 12-hour mark is when the game started to pick up some steam, and that's a little late in my opinion. And for a genre that emphasizes player choice and being able to solve quests in multiple ways, It really only felt like there was one way to solve quests or puzzles. I was wandering around Sicile aimlessly for some time until I found this book that I must have passed over at least a few times. That gave me the information I needed to progress and get the XP to level up. Progression was frustrating at times, and quest information doesn't really give you a whole lot to go off of. Pillars of Eternity 2 did a good job of telling you where you needed to go, and if you're too underpowered to do a quest without feeling like it was holding your hand. I mentioned puzzles earlier, and a large part of Divinity's gameplay loop is solving puzzles, especially when you go crawling through dungeons. A lot of these puzzles though really just come down to finding these tiny, easy to miss switches on the walls. I'd spend minutes looking for a switch that I had to have passed over at least a dozen times. Some puzzles get a little creative though, others are more obtuse. I wouldn't blame you if you looked up online how to solve them. I'll admit, I did. Combat is what you expect from the genre. Turn-based battles of all manner of swords, bows, wands, specialty arrows, spells, and special attacks at your disposal. Original Sin differs in that you need to understand how elemental damage works. There's fire, water, earth, and poison damage types, and they each work with each other in different ways. For example, fire and poison creates an explosion to set enemies ablaze. Dousing a flame with water creates a steam or smoke cloud. Using an ice or electric spell on a puddle of water will either create an ice patch that enemies can slip on, or create an electric trap to stun them. Having this knowledge can give you an advantage in battle, and it's where having a feature like being able to identify what a puddle is made out of would come in handy. Sometimes I wouldn't even know I was standing in a puddle. Water and oil are pretty dark in color, and they can both blend into the environment pretty well. The hitboxes for puddles are also super sensitive. You have to be super meticulous with where you navigate. Even if your character's little toe touches a poison patch, your character is getting poisoned. Things would also just happen in combat for whatever reason, like something randomly exploding without reason. I couldn't tell you how many times I accidentally electrocuted one of my companions, also seeming for no reason, and every time it was frustrating. You also need to be extremely precise about where you click when you launch an attack. An enemy's idle animation can cause you to shoot an arrow at the ground by their feet rather than the actual enemy because their animation moved away from your cursor at the last second. This also happened multiple times. I also want to mention the identify mechanic because while I get why it's here, I found it extremely tedious. So when you stumble upon a rare or legendary item, you need someone in your party with a high enough lore master stat so they can identify it to see its attributes. I get it. If I was an adventurer in a mystical fantasy land, I'm not going to know exactly what a random item that an enemy dropped is right off the bat. I would need the knowledge necessary to know what that item is. It makes sense, but it also slows the flow of gameplay, especially after a large battle where a lot of items were dropped. Going along with gripes I had with the game, there are a lot of sections of this game that I did not like. There's several areas that have environmental effects going on, like torrential rainfall or high winds that give your party negative status effects. Areas with difficulty spikes aren't the worst thing in the world, they're just not very fun to play through, especially when they're unskippable. The environment effects also caused the audio of my game to cut out, which was annoying. One area in particular, Hyberheim, was the worst of them all. I hated this area. It's a snowy tundra with ice patches everywhere, causing my characters to slip all the time, and I have to wait a few seconds for them to get back up so I can move forward. Once you enter this section, you're also stuck there until you complete the area. There's also this forced stealth section, which people always love, where there's these indestructible enemies that can kill you in one turn. If you aren't prepared for this section, then you have to backtrack to go get the necessary items or spells that you'll need. The writing of Original Sin is fine. It's mostly lighthearted despite the world-ending stakes of the story, which is fine. I'd say it matches the more cartoonish graphic style. The attempts at humor didn't really land for me though. It was actually quite eye-rolling most of the time. The voice acting was very theatrical and passionate, like the actors really gave it their all here, so I have to give credit to them for that. But it did make the idle dialogue that NPCs repeat very annoying. There are 4 companions to join your party outside of your 2 main characters. This may seem small, but I don't mind actually because I usually don't use companions that are introduced later into games. I rocked with Medora and Jahan most of the game since they complemented my party pretty well. They each have their own side quests you can embark on, but you'll usually complete these as you progress through the main story. The stories are all interesting. I don't really have any complaints about the companions, although I did think that Jahan was a little edgy at times. Now let's talk about the bugs. because there's two that I want to talk about that was a huge source of frustration for me. The first being the main one, and that's that the game's files in OneDrive are not compatible. So if the game files are backed up to OneDrive, something about the system's antivirus software prevents you from saving, causing the game to do sort of a mini crash. It did get to a point though where I wasn't able to save at all and I had to move the files off OneDrive, which you can look up online to solve, but it's still a major annoyance. The other big issue came during the final boss fight where a bug occurred that prevented me from killing the boss, even though its health was at 0. Of course, this was resolved by reloading an old save, but at this point, I was ready to be done with the game and I seriously considered just not even finishing it.
But I'm not trying to redo the fight, dude. Come on.
I'm not doing all that bullshit again, man. This motherfucker will literally not die. He is on 0 health and he will not die. It is a bug. This is a bug that is happening, preventing me from playing the game. That is fucking bullshit. That is horrible, man. They said it was fixed. It is not fixed if it's still happening, dude. You gotta reload a whole save, play the whole boss fight over again? Other glitches just provided minor inconveniences, like when I couldn't attack an enemy because they're standing under a tree branch. Overall, I was disappointed by Divinity Original Sin. The foundation was there that Larian would eventually build into Baldur's Gate 3. I just wish I enjoyed it more. I'm still gonna hop right into the sequel and I'm very excited to do so, but I think my expectations are now even higher for Original Sin 2, because that is the one that everyone raves about. There were things that I liked about Original Sin 1, but there were also a lot of things I didn't like. Despite being in an RPG, I didn't really feel like there were a whole lot of meaningful choices that could potentially shape the narrative and maybe encourage a replay. I just don't see myself revisiting this one. And because of that, I'm feeling a 5 on Original Sin 1. So if y'all played this game, did you enjoy it more than I did? Let me know down in the comments. I will be playing Original Sin 2 next, so if you want to watch me stream that game and hear what I have to say about it in real time, I'll leave the link to my Twitch down below. Thank you guys for watching. Consider liking or subscribing to the channel if you want to support. I'll leave a link to another one of my reviews in the corner right here. That being said, I'm Sam Lebowski. Take it easy, dudes, and I'll catch you next time.